All right, are you ready to see what she's going to look like? Or maybe I should say what it's going to look like when we put the skin on it. The process we're going to use for this you've probably already seen. We're going to remesh it and then project all the details. We've got a couple of problems that we need to be mindful of, such as the holes in between areas and this area here in the back as well. Might be wise to fill that, but before we bother adding to our workload, let's just see what kind of trouble we get into from scratch without adding any more to it. I'm going to select the topmost tool, turn Remesh off, and I'm going to select Remesh All. Now, by its nature, depending on its resolution, it's going to create a global form. More resolution means it'll pick up the space in between. Less resolution means that it's going to average out and really merge some of those open gaps. So all we really have to think about at the end of the day is merging some of those pieces. Or, I'm sorry, lowering the resolution. Alright, doesn't look too shabby. Let's come down, select it, and looks like it filled in all the main areas that I needed it to fill in. Let's look at it with solo mode. Yeah, not too bad. So this is a simplification representing our muscles. We can see the zygomatic major off to the side, coming down and connecting into the nodule, zygomatic minor, connecting up here along the top, levator labii superioris, alakinezi coming down. We've got the orbit of the eye, everything that's entailed in that. We've got the temporal line, we've got the frontalis, we have the zygomatic arch, the masseter, cursorius, mouth muscle, triangularis. Nose is intact. So the question at this point is, what do we need to do with all of this anatomical knowledge and all these anatomical points? What do we need to do to make this a realistic face? What are the elements involved in that? So it's a lot easier than you might think. I'm going to outline the key planes that we need to be mindful of. The first plane that I want you to be thinking of is already very painfully obvious, and that's the infraorbital triangle. The infraorbital triangle is something that changes as you get older, and it's not always a triangle. It could be a rectangle. And as you get older, all of that nice, beautiful cheek fat that's there will start to descend. And then in time, it ends up as actually fat on the jowls. So all of this just becomes a landslide and starts heading downwards. But for now, for our character, we're talking about creating this triangular surface. What are the boundaries for it? On one side, you can see the zygomatic major. On another side, you can see the orbit of the eye, or the let's just say the infraorbital margin. And then on the other side, we have the nasal labial fold. And where are they heading? The nodule at the side of the mouth. So that's one plane, infraorbital triangle. We have another plane that we can be looking at, and this one is a rectangle. And what do you notice about this rectangle? Its borders are the zygomatic major, the masseter, the jaw, and the triangularis, coming straight down from the nodule at the side of the mouth. So here we have these nice front planes that quickly descend and become side planes. And again, these areas are all areas that are filled with fat or not filled with fat. So depending on the person, for example, Clint Eastwood, not going to have a lot of fat here in the infraorbital triangle. So his form is going to his face is going to conform more to the muzzle of this mouth. So all of the form is going to start to really just kind of hug in there with this really nice angular jaw or angular cheek poking out. So infraorbital triangle, the rectangle along the side of the face bordering the masseter. You need to make sure that you're getting side plane of the nose intact, front plane of the nose. Yeah. Make sure the brow is in a happy place. We've already got the barrel of the mouth. All of that's intact and happening. And then this is going to wrap around. Everything else is largely conforming exactly as it is. No real reason to change it in any major way. To fill in these areas, we're going to use the clay brush. And make sure you have symmetry on. It's not going to be on by default. We're just going to fill this in. Little bit by little bit. The space in between the zygomatic major and the risorius. Then we're going to fill in from the risorius down to the mandible. And we're going to make sure that we interpolate between the masseter on one side and the triangularis on another. Use the trim dynamic brush to just blend between all of this. Press Alt if you need to. Come all the way up to the cheek. Okay, then the next piece for us is the infraorbital triangle. Clay brush as well. What we're thinking about is the nasal labial fold, which is being outlined pretty much by the end of the masseter, or not the masseter, but the outline of the orbicularis oris. Try to leave the bone alone in the eye, and just fill that in. Now this is going to be large on some people. Nice round rosy cheeks. Squint your eyes and you can see the form happening there. Or on other people, it's going to be almost, as we've said before, non-existent and really follow the structure of the muzzle of the mouth, in which case it starts to be a bit of a different look. Definitely more male, definitely a little bit on the strong macho side. We're going to add some cheek fat for ours, though. Trim dynamic, and just plane it. Press Alt again to blend it. I'm going to plane down the orbicularis oris just a little bit. I'm going to add a little bit of volume in between the triangularis and the mentalis. So remember, triangularis, mentalis. Add a little bit of form down along the bottom. And smooth that out. So quite naturally creating a head. Everything is kind of already in place. It even looks like we have hair just because of the shadow. And all we had to do was add a couple of elements to our anatomical knowledge. So just to outline, infraorbital triangle, the rectangle along the side, and then we just had to bridge the chin and the triangularis. Now, the job for us is to go in and get the details that we have in here, the details that we really like and we already sculpted, such as the nose, the eye, and the mouth. So how are we going to put those guys in there? We're going to turn solo off. I'm going to select the Z project brush. Divide this once, twice, however many times you feel you need to. You can do this with symmetry, but it behaves badly in a 3/4 view, so be mindful of that. It's really best from a front view if you're going to use symmetry. Make sure Z-add is on. RGB does not need to be on. Press Alt, and that's going to shrink wrap. Let go of Alt, and that's going to pull everything forward. Same with the eye. In the corner of the eye, I'm going to change my tactic. Symmetry is off. Press Alt. Okay, so there we've got it roughly indicated. You can turn solo mode on, and now we just need to smooth in between them. But we have one problem that's really standing out. So this is a really good point for you to check your model, see what's going on, see if you can see what's wrong with my model. Can anybody guess what's going wrong? The key thing is that nose and those lips are damn near on the same plane, and that's not going to work. Part of the problem is when I created the nose, I did not push it out far enough. That's partly because the slope of my the skeletal part that I drew was way too shallow. So that led to me doing this. The skull was not accurate. The skull was inaccurate to the face that I eventually wanted, but that's going to happen to you too, because we're not starting like a forensic artist with an exact skull. So I need to do a change. No problem. I need to decide which one I'm going to change though, nose or the mouth. And so I'm going to let my forensic markers help me with that. Okay, and it looks like the mouth is largely in good shape, about 10 millimeters is what our thickness was. But keep in mind that the ultimate character we're going to go for is not an average character. We're going to tend towards supermodel, which means that the measurements we have right now for an average face are absolutely not going to cut it. Supermodel is called super for a reason, and that's because their face and their body type are not average. So the body fat index is going to be significantly less, which means that we should be able to see a little bit of each one of these markers all the way around, everywhere. But we'll see how that works as we continue to refine her. But right now, I'm going to average the difference between these guys. I'm going to push the lips in slightly. So let's make sure we've turned everything else off but the forensic markers. And pull the nose out. Okay, I'm getting this nice slope. Pulling in. The columella is looking nice. This is of course something that varies with everybody, so you want to be mindful of that. And we'll just make sure we get a nice upturn to the lips. Solo mode is on. Look at it from below. And we're going to pull the cheek and the nostril forward slightly. Okay, so time to smooth out some of this. I'm going to push the lips back as well, the lower lip that is. Fill in any remaining really aggressive areas like the jaw here. And I'm going to really emphasize that masseter, the temporalis I meant. Careful of the back side. Make sure back face masking is on if you can. Don't lose track of the side plane of the face and the nose. But don't get too detailed either. So if you find yourself confused, then relax and let's move on to the next piece. Okay. So we've got a face in play here, not male, not female necessarily, but anatomical and roughly in place. So this is the stage that I wanted us to get to. The stage where we weren't quite sure what was going to happen and what was going on. We have some mistakes, some positive things, but either way you should have an accurate representation of the orbit of the eye, cheek, masseter, nose with a nostril, lips, chin, mandible, forehead. All of that stuff should be in play with the eye in a safe location. All of that should be in play. Now, the next thing for us to do is to start to define what this is going to look like. Who is this and all of that business. So we're doing we're working on a female, and so I'm going to go through and make a couple of adjustments. I'm going to make the lips a little bit smaller. I'm going to make the upper lip a little bit more pointed and larger. I'm going to make the nose kind of disappear. I'm going to make those eyes wider and taller. I'm going to make the cheeks a little bit wider. This is a little bit. I'm going to pull that nasal labial fold backwards. I'm going to reduce that chin. Not a common surgery operation, but it does produce more feminine quality. We're already starting to look more feminine. It's already looking for more feminine, and all we did was widen the eyes, widen the cheek, smaller mouth, softer forms. That's it. We could just as easily go more aggressive. We could start to cut away some of the the infraorbital triangle fat. Push that to be a little bit more aggressive and forward, harder edged. I'm going to start to reveal some of the hollows in there. Shrink those eyes down. Really small. Larger nasal opening. Thinner lips. Spread out. Add some strong contrast here in the underneath the cheek. Increase the size of the masseter. And increase the chin. And definitely, unmistakably, more masculine. All of that happening pretty quickly. There's not a lot to do. So what I wanted to make sure that you're doing is creating the face and not sweating male, female, beautiful, not beautiful, any of that stuff. Don't sweat that yet. You have got so much to think about with the anatomy. And then, once you have it, remesh it like I have done this, and come in and start to sculpt this as you now understand the anatomy. Remember, infraorbital margin, frontal process, try to figure out that brow, how all of this is relating. Make a female, make a male, however you want to do it at this point. Age the person, start to really add the fat underneath. Okay, thin the upper lips. You don't have to thin them much, you just have to thin them a little bit, and it starts to make somebody look older. Bone is largely going to stay unchanged. So I wouldn't go changing the brow or dropping it or doing anything major there. Nose is going to get larger. It's the nature of it. Cartilage grows slightly. See how I just took a little bit of that lip away? Same thing here. Inner and outer portion become less distinct. Marionette line, much more dramatically obvious. And the fat that was in the infraorbital triangle, now down along the chin. Masseter is weakened, or at least the thickness of the skin has disappeared. The zygomatic arch is now more prominent, and things like that. So a lot more work to do to make this any one particular face, but that is your job. So do your best to get the face that you want on here. Remember, soft equals feminine, hard equals masculine, and there's a lot that you can do in between. So I hope the lessons were useful. I hope all of this information was easily presentable. If anything, remember the mistake that I made with the nose. Start to adjust for that. And the key things to get out of all of this portion of the lecture is a sense of the thickness of the skin. Remember the average that we are taking from forensic research. Remember not to hold 100% to that. Use it as a guide. The other really important elements to get out of this and glean out of this are the very specific constructions of things like the frontal process of the maxilla, as well as the different portions of the mouth muscle and how the nodule at the side of the mouth, how the fibers of that will wrap upwards towards the nose and start to create their own form. You'll notice that on people now as you're looking at them talking, things like that. So again, good luck with your sculpting, and I hope this was useful.